Okay.
No, I don't.
That's
We'll not do that.
And then they said, "Oh, we never said another, said about
We got banquets in there too.
mercy,
Someone-
you know.
No, try not.
Well, I'll be your dentist.
Let me keep pushing that.
Sometimes I have to
We're gonna
do
get
it.
started.
No, no.
We got
Yeah,
an
it's very
announcement.
Okay, y'all, we're getting started.
We got an announcement from Vicki about the adventurers, Wilshire adventurers. Well, just kick off with that.
Okay, okay. I may just sit since we're so small. Can you all hear me?
Make yourself comfortable.
Okay, Rob just asked me if I would just put in a plug for the trip to Charleston, and it is November 6th through the 11th. I'm not going because my stepson lives there, and I've been many times to visit him. And it is a beautiful place, and if you've never been there, or if you've been there once, this will be a little different because the tours, if you've never been with Will, you've been on these trips. Have you ever been, Sandra, on some of their trips? No?
Oh, you need
They're
to go.
they're so organized, and everything is like, it's not so regimented that you feel uncomfortable or pushed. They have a plan, and you do what's planned, and you go, and everybody's cordial and sweet. I mean, really, if you want to know the truth, that's why I joined Wilshire. I went on that trip in September after I moved here, and I've never seen so many people get along so beautifully. Not that we fight in Oklahoma, but you know, that's kind of what it sounds like. But I was so impressed that everybody was so cooperative. It's a
What
good
was your
word.
first trip?
LA,
LA?
yeah,
Mhm.
and I had never been except to land and go somewhere else, you know. So
Mhm.
I'd never been there, but it was a wonderful trip, and I've been on several, and they're just so well planned that you see all the highlights, kind of in depth, because if you do a tour, they tell you lots of things that I don't know. I read through all this last night, and I thought, I need to go back and say, Steve, you need to take me to this, you know. But if you do a tour, you have somebody there that tells you about the places and tells you about the history. And there's a lot of history there. One is the first Baptist church is in Charleston. And I didn't know that. I've seen it, I have pictures of it, but I didn't realize, or I'd forgotten maybe. But anyway, I've got 2 or 3 of these, but they're down at the office, just inside the office if it may be interested. So you might want to, and I've got 3 extras if you want one, so.
And you don't have to do everything that the group is doing. I mean,
No.
there's plenty of time that.
You get time to rest, and you know, it's casual, but you just don't feel pushed, you know, but you just there's a lot of stuff to do, so, and a lot of stuff to see, and Rob and, Pam, they did a great job. We did, Chicago, Grand Rapids, and Mackinac Island last March.
September?
Oh, September, thank you. Anyway, I should.
I was on the
Too many
trip.
trips.
Yeah, she was on the trip. Thank goodness, I needed help her.
Do we have just a minute for me to tell you what happened to me on this trip?
Okay.
Okay, the Yarbroughs, I think, picked me up, and we had a bus that was gonna go from Wilshire out to the airport after the
Oh,
day.
yeah.
And I was going to be so ready, that I took my license out of my billfold and I had it in my hand. And when I got up to the point where I had to show my license, it was gone. And I didn't, you know, and so I went through security there, I went through security in Detroit, and when I got home, there was a message from a gentleman, and very nice message, and he said, I found your license, I put it in the mail, and my Monday of that, when we got home, was my birthday. I got it on my birthday. But don't lose your license at DFW.
And it's a frantic feeling because, you know, you can't go through without it. It was an ordeal just for her to get on every, you know, so it was.
Stupid me,
it-
yeah.
No, it just happens. We
Who's
do.
eligible to go on the trip?
Well, it's really for seniors, but a lot of every.
You're not
yeah.
old enough.
Yeah, you're not old enough yet. No, but they do.
We will let you go.
Yeah, we would let you, you would have a great time because somebody does everything for you. You don't have to think. They say, this afternoon, remember you can do this or this. Or you've signed up early. Some of you have to sign up early to get tickets. And if it's a place where you have to have tickets, they have your tickets for you. I mean, it's just, it's so well organized, and Rob and Pam did a great job, and they're doing this one. Mark Wingfield
That shouldn't
used to do it.
surprise any of us. They always do a great
Yeah.
job.
Well, it's 55 and over for the group, you know, that's the number they put on adventures, but people do take like a daughter, or they'll take a son, or, you know, somebody that.
Lots of toddlers then?
No, no children. No, I've done that, I don't do that, but I tolerate my own, but I'm not very good with the group, so.
Well, thank you for letting us know about that. I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with the tapestry this morning, and we want to give Bill plenty of time anyway, but I will mention that the Crucible is, I guess, this
Yes.
week, on the 24th and 25th, the Wilshire in 3D. So,
And
that's
this is
a
Doug's
big
swan
one.
song.
Is there anything else that needs special mention as I sit here and flip through and try to catch anything that everybody needs to know? No, we're all good. Well, why don't we go ahead then and turn the lectern over to Bill, and let's find out all about Maundy Thursday and the Crucifixion.
All right. I put this on the board because at the end of the lesson, I wanted to talk about those two issues and wanted to give you a little time to begin to think about that in your own experience. Let's start this morning. The lesson is on the crucifixion. And so let's start this morning by reading from Mark's Gospel, the 15th chapter, about the crucifixion. All four Gospels record the crucifixion. And I'm choosing Mark's Gospel primarily because it's the shortest version of the crucifixion. It has all the details of the other three Gospels, but it does not describe it in as much length as the other three Gospels. So let's start and just read through what Mark has to say about the crucifixion in Mark chapter 15, beginning with verse 22. And they brought him to the place Golgotha, which is translated, place of a skull. And they tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, and divided up his garments among themselves, casting lots for them, to decide which each should take. And it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And they crucified 2 robbers with him, one on his right and one on his left. And the scripture was fulfilled, which says, "And he was numbered with transgressors." And those passing by were hurling abuse at him, wagging their heads, and saying, "Ha, you're going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes, were mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. Let this Christ, the King of Israel, now come down from the cross so that we may see and believe." And those who were crucified with him were casting the same insult at him. And when the 6th hour had come, darkness fell over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which is translated, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And when some of the bystanders heard it, they began saying, "Behold, he's calling for Elijah." And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave him a drink, saying, "Let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last breath. And the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion, who was standing right in front of him, saw the way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." And there was also some women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene, and Mary, the mother of James the Less, and Joseph and Salome. And when he was in Galilee, they used to follow him and minister to him. And there were many other women who had come up with him to Jerusalem. Anything stands out to you that you want to comment on this passage?
Here, they did, there was the one criminal who called out to him and said, "Remember me."
Right.
So but it's not mentioned in this account.
Right, it's in Matthew.
Well, I've been reading, I'm in John right now, going through the New Testament this year, and, there's several things, like you said, that are left out. It is a shorter version, so that's why you need to read all four. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, we'll chase a rabbit or two along the way, okay? It's interesting that in the Gospels that mention the criminal who cried out to him, that Jesus said, "This day I will be with you," where?
Paradise.
Paradise. He didn't say heaven. He said paradise. And Jesus knew the difference. There were two different words, a word for heaven and a word for paradise. And paradousia literally means walled garden. And so Jesus said to this guy, "Today I will be with you in the walled garden." This is where Tertullian in the 12th century developed the Roman Catholic version of purgatory, a place, not heaven, not hell, but paradise. And the Catholics believe that when we die, we go to purgatory, and that we can be removed from purgatory to go to heaven or to hell. Now, purgatory has received a bad name because during the Reformation, the Catholic Church started selling indulgences to get your loved ones out of purgatory. If your mama died and went to purgatory and she was a bad person, if you made the church enough, if you gave the church enough money, enough indulgence, your mama could be taken out of purgatory to go to heaven. And that was a real abuse of Tertullian's concept of purgatory. We Baptists have never had much to do with the concept of purgatory. But the fact is, there's a lot of scriptural proof for the concept of an intermediate state between heaven and hell. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul talks about having been caught up into the third paradousia, the third paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, he didn't know. And then if you read Hebrews chapter 11, begins by saying, "Wherefore I'm old and my mind's not working anymore." But
Join the
there in
club.
Hebrews chapter 11,
The right class.
he talks about, let us lay aside every sin that beseeches us. But, well, let me just look it up so I can get it exactly right.
What verse is it? I've got it open.
Okay, Hebrews chapter 1.
Oh, 1, I was 12 for some reason.
Bill, while you look that up, just a thought occurred to me. You think of purgatory, it shares a root word with the word purge. purging doesn't sound very pleasant. And so I've always kind of had, when I think of purgatory, it sounds like a fairly unpleasant place. But that seems to be a little bit in contrast with the walled garden of paradise that Jesus is referring to there. So maybe it's not as bad as it sounds.
Well, it doesn't necessarily, it seems to be a contradiction, but when you think about it, where would you go to be purged? What better place
Right.
to go to be purged?
Well, in pretty good company if Jesus is going to be there with you.
Yeah. Hebrews chapter 11, I said 1, chapter 11. He talks about faith being the assured of things hoped for. And then in chapter 12, he says, therefore, since we have a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us. Now, he's just talked about all of the saints of the Old Testament in chapter 11. And he says, since we have a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. Chapter 11, we have all these saints who've died before us. And chapter 12, because of that, let us lay aside, because we have this great cloud of witnesses, all these who've died, let us lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which entangles us, and run the race which is set before us. So these folks who've died and gone on before us, where are they if they are witnessing us? If they are seeing us, let us run the race. I don't think it could be heaven. I mean, you could be heartbroken if you saw us, if you're in heaven. And you could be heartbroken if you saw us in purgatory as well. But purgatory must not be a place that is the ultimate. There in First Thessalonians chapter 4, he talks about when Jesus comes back, he's going to bring with him those who have died in the faith. So if we go directly to heaven when we die, is God going to yank us out of heaven and bring us back? And we'll be caught up together with them to meet the Lord in the air?
That's kind of what they're saying.
I'm sorry?
That's kind of what they're saying.
Yeah, unless there is an intermediate state.
I don't know that you need an intermediate state.
Huh?
I don't know that you need an intermediate state.
Well, I don't know that we do either, but the scripture seems to indicate that there is such a place. And no one can talk authoritatively about the future. And if you find people talking authoritatively about it, you can guess they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, be relatively assured of that too.
Right. But just to get your mind stretched a little, to start thinking about what Jesus said when he said, today you're going to be with me, not heaven, but the walled city. Okay, anything else about that passage that jumps out at you?
Well, we're stuck in a sense of time, and isn't time something we have, and God's time is not time.
Okay, there is this theory of soul sleeping, that when we die, our soul goes to sleep, and that we sleep until Jesus comes back.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's any, under that concept, there wouldn't be any until. If the time is ended, and there, you can find scripture for that, you know, it's the end of time, and so it's something we don't get, we can't understand.
Yeah, there's in the Greek, there is the concept of chronos, time, how we measure time. And when you talk about eternity, chronos time doesn't align with eternity. So there is an end of time for every one of us. Chronos time for every one of us.
Well, you know, Bill, back about paradise, I've always thought it was heaven, but couldn't a walled city be heaven?
Well, it
You know,
could
I mean, I
probably
think of
be
it sort of
used-
as a garden. I think we kind of imagine, I mean, you've got.
Why do you need
in-
walls if it's heaven?
Huh?
Why do you need walls if it's heaven?
Yeah.
Keep the bad people in hell.
Plus the fact Jesus knew the term for heaven.
Mhm.
And if it had been heaven, why didn't he say heaven? We don't know. I'm just throwing that out there for you to think about. Well, one of the things that jumps out at me in the four Gospels about the crucifixion, every one of them just said they crucified him. Gives no details at all about crucifixion. Now, why did the gospel writers not describe what crucifixion is all about?
Maybe because they loved him so much, and it was painful to talk about.
Well,
Because the treatment, getting ready for the crucifixion was so grotesque and gruesome and horrifying.
and I mean, just think of the term itself, crucifixion. I mean, that does not engender a whole lot of positiveness.
Well, I wonder, like, they were writing the Gospels. They weren't necessarily writing the Gospels thinking that people in the future would be reading them, right? So people probably knew it. It's like today, like, they were killed in the electric chair. Well, people don't describe what that is, because in general, you understand what it is, and I'm sure a pretty gory process, right? So, I'm thinking of that analogy, like if someone said today they were killed by lethal injection, we know what that is, and yeah.
I think you're right on target, Diane. They knew what crucifixion was, so there was no need to describe it. How many of you all saw Bruce Willis's movie, The Passion of Christ? Any of you see
You mean
that?
Mel Gibson?
Mel Gibson.
Years ago.
It's 10, 12 years ago probably when it came out.
Yeah, Mel Gibson.
That describes to the modern mind what crucifixion was all about. And it was the most horrible way to die. And there were several different ways to crucify, but they all wound up with the same end result, of course. But one of the most gruesome parts of crucifixion is that they usually strip the person naked to crucify them, and took away all their human dignity by doing that. Another form of crucifixion would to cross the legs and to secure the legs by different means, so that a person wouldn't have the power to hold themselves up to breathe. A lot of people died of strangulation simply because they couldn't breathe. They also often only raise the person's feet this far above the ground. Most of the crucifixion images that we see, a person's up high, but that's not as accurate, or as common, I should say, as this far off the ground, so that dogs could come and eat the feet while the person's still alive. And it was horrible. And so the gospel writers didn't need to re-emphasize that because people knew it. They had seen it. And most people lived for days when they were crucified. Jesus lived 3 hours. And why was that? Do you all remember reading a few years ago about the Shroud of Turin? The birth, they said it was probably the birth cloth of Jesus in which he was wrapped after he was taken off the cross. Well, the Shroud of Turin, and it may or may not be, there's no way for us to know for sure, but if that was the cloth in which Jesus was wrapped, that person had an extra long arms like Abe Lincoln did. Marfan's syndrome is a person whose arms are extraordinarily long. And a person with Marfan's syndrome, if their upper cavity is stressed, they usually die fairly instantly. And so Jesus may have had Marfan's syndrome, and it may have been the reason that he died within 3 hours. We don't know. Yes.
You know, he fulfilled God's promise to us, you know, by willingly, so to speak. I mean, he didn't want to do it, but then he knew he had to do it, to die on the cross for us. So I feel like maybe, I've not really thought about this a lot until you said that, but that God was just merciful, and then he gave up the ghost. You know, he then gave up and died because God allowed that. And so I feel like God was just merciful so that he didn't have to suffer any more than he already had. And the other people did live on, you know, we assume, you know, the thieves on the cross and all.
Now, we have no idea how long they lived. The gospel is silent at that part. It's interesting that Roman citizens were not allowed to be crucified. It's too inhumane for a Roman citizen.
They probably got the electric chair.
It's interesting that in Deuteronomy 21, verse 23, it talks about the fact that if a person is crucified, that it is a sign they are accursed of God. Think about that a minute. The Jewish people believed that in the days of Jesus. And so it was the religious leaders who led the assault against Jesus. They remember the crowd yelling out when they were given the choice between Jesus and Barabbas. They point to Jesus, and the crowd starts crying what? Crucify, crucify. This would have been proof to the Jewish people that he was not the Messiah, because the Messiah couldn't be one who was accursed by God. And so this was intentional. The crucifixion is a way of getting rid of Jesus, to prove to all the people for all time that he's not the Messiah. There was one fly in that ointment. That was Sunday. You all may have heard Tony Campolo, wonderful Baptist preacher who taught sociology at Eastern Baptist College. Campolo was a member of a black church in Philadelphia. And the church he was a member of in Philadelphia had a preach-a-thon on Friday before Easter. and they had hours of preaching. And the pastor always preached the last sermon during that preach-a-thon. And Campolo one year preached the sermon right before the pastor. And Campolo said, it was one of the best sermons I ever preached. And when I finished, I thought, now what's the pastor going to do to top that? And the pastor preached the sermon. It's Friday, but Sunday's a coming. And he kept coming back to that theme all the way through. And when he finished, he screamed, it's Friday. And the congregation screamed back at him, but Sunday's a coming. Well, Sunday's a coming. And although the crucifixion ended Jesus' earthly life, Sunday's coming. And every time we talk about the crucifixion, we need to remember that Sunday is a coming. Now the cross is viewed very differently today than it was in the first century. It was 400 years before we have any record of the cross being used the way it is today. On the church doors of a little village in Rome, about 400 AD, there appeared the cross with Jesus hanging on it on the doors of the Basilica of Santa Sabine near Rome. And since that time, since 400, the cross has taken on a totally different view by humanity. How do you see the cross being used today? Where do you see the cross today? Visually.
Everywhere.
All right, name some
Church
everywhere.
steeples, jewelry.
Jewelry and necklaces and things like
Flags.
that.
Yeah.
Decorations.
Tattoos,
Tattoos. In fact,
And on the
Diane,
walls.
in Egypt, it is customary for the Christian to have a tattoo of the cross on their
Wow.
wrist
interesting.
to remind them of the crucifixion of
The
Jesus.
flags have crosses on them.
I'm sorry?
The European flags, most of them have except for France, have a
Exactly.
cross.
Mhm.
Now, it's kind of, it's a symbol, but it becomes a symbol of some other things too.
Yeah.
Even the Germans in World War II, the swastika is the crooked cross.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's how they perceived it.
Yeah. God was on their side, by the way. Just like he was on our side during, well, our wars. And what about roadside crosses where somebody's been killed? You see those regularly. And why do women wear jewelry with a cross on it?
It's their favorite.
They're not the only ones.
I'm sorry?
They are not the only ones.
No,
There's
that's
some
true.
men that wear those too.
Well, I can't, I don't.
And I'm not condemning that, I'm just asking the question.
But I've always thought, I have a cross necklace and a couple of things like that. But of course, to me, it's meaningful. And I've always thought, anytime I see someone with one, of course, it's just an assumption, but I think surely someone who's not a believer would not be interested in wearing that. Why would you wear that?
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a shape, but maybe to some people it is, I don't know.
Protestants wear plain crosses, and the Catholics often will have crucifix.
Mhm.
Not necessarily for jewelry, but for a lot of,
Right.
it's just a different way of looking at Jesus and he's gone. He didn't stay.
I remember, just as a kid, asking my mother, why do you sometimes see, I didn't know what to call it, but a crucifix. And, I was just a little Baptist child. And she said, well, we don't have, ours are plain, because we know Jesus isn't on it anymore. But
It is funny though, my older son has become Catholic after he married a Catholic girl, and so when I would come to visit, I would go with them to Mass. And it's interesting because I never go except every once in a while, with them, and I really don't ever go anymore because I have my own church, but it affects me when I go in and see it because I never see it. So when I go, unless you're in Europe in a cathedral or, somewhere, but basilica or somewhere, but you look up and it really, it touches me. But because I don't see it very often. So I wonder sometimes with them seeing it all the time, it's on their rosary, it's on, I don't think it's a plain cross, isn't it a crucifix? And I wonder, it's kind of like memorizing a prayer, and saying it like they do a lot of that, so it's kind of a criticism, I think. But how meaningful is that when we say the Lord's Prayer every day? Is it meaningful to you? Do you think about what it is? But that's that crucifix, because I don't see it, but maybe Christmas time I go with them and I look up and there it is and I think, wow, he really did that. You're reminded at Christmas instead of just Easter.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And oftentimes, because I have one in my home, in the hallway of my house, and oftentimes when I get up in the morning, I stand before it and I say the Lord's Prayer. It's kind of the, I don't know, ritual maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do that all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I'm busy and I miss, in the late evening I'll go back there because it means something to me to stand there in front of Jesus and pray, I guess.
It kind of grounds you.
Yeah,
Deborah?
that's a
Yeah.
good terminology.
I
yes.
get that, yeah.
Some of you are young enough old enough to remember when people carried change in their pocket.
I still do.
And there was a layman at a church in Knoxville who carried a cross in his pocket with his change. So when he would reach into his pocket to bring out his change, there was the cross. And he said many times people would say, "What are you doing carrying that cross?" And he would tell them what he was doing carrying that cross.
He ought to retort and say, what are you doing not carrying that?
Yeah.
He's trying to be nice, Mike, he's trying to be nice.
Yeah.
But you can see that the cross has taken on a totally different image today from its original intent. And why do we not hear much anymore about the crucifixion? When I was a kid growing up, I heard sermons all the time about the crucifixion. And, it's been a long time since I've heard a sermon on the crucifixion.
George Mason said, Americans want to rush to Easter and Lent is just abandoned. They don't want to think about, we're Americans, we're optimistic, we own good cars. And he said we kind of overlooked, that's why he started that one reason, the Maundy, Thursday.
It's hard for us, well, I shouldn't say it that way. We waste our grief if we don't learn from it. And we are not very good at wading through our grief. And so that's probably one of the reasons is that we want to do away with our grief, our hurt, our pain. I think another reason is our increasing sense of self-worth. Modern psychology has helped us feel good about ourselves, and I'm not condemning that. We do need to feel good about ourselves. but we also need to be honest about ourselves. And there is a diminishing sense of sin in our lives. And that may be because of our attempts to feel better about ourselves. And so we just don't hear much about the crucifixion anymore.
You know, it was our sin that put him there, so we don't want to talk about that. You know, really, I mean, you're right, I think. It's just, you know, if we have to think about the crucifixion, then we have to realize why he was there. He took all of our sin on himself for us, and we don't want to be guilty of that or responsible for that.
It's hard, it's painful. And none of us like to deal with pain. I don't. All right, what is the meaning of the cross for us today? What does it say to us when we talk about the crucifixion? What does that mean? Why do we even talk about it?
It's tangible evidence that Jesus died for our sins.
And why did he die for us?
I think it's the greatest love story. It's the greatest love story, really.
Yeah.
He also
God's given-
fulfilled prophecy by doing that.
Well, yeah.
I think
But-
he also made himself available to us in a sort of an abstract way. By that I mean, it'd be one thing if Jesus was this unblemished, never suffered, never went through any kind of trial or ordeal. How could we expect someone like that to identify with us? And we have instead a Savior that has been through more than we ever will.
Yeah. Tempted like unto every way we are.
Yeah.
Well, there was no greater way for God to show his love than to give his son. And it dawned on me recently that genuine love is always descending. God's love came down to us. And whom do we love? Genuine love is toward those to whom we can descend God's love. For instance, we love our children. We love our grandchildren. If we live old enough to be great-grandparents, we love our great-grandchildren. And whom did Jesus love? He loved the outcasts. His first sermon in his hometown, he talked about the outcasts, the blind, the sick, the widows. And genuine love is always descending. Now, ascending love is often selfish love. When we love those who can do good for us, that's descending love. Our boss, the mayor, the governor, whomever. Descending love is often selfish. Descending love is always pure. It should always be pure. The purest form of love is descending love. So if we really love, we don't necessarily love those who can do good for us. We love those who we can do good for. Now, we've been talking about the crucifixion. Maundy Thursday in the Christian tradition is usually the one service that we focus on the crucifixion. And Baptists have not celebrated Maundy Thursday. until fairly recent years. And there's still probably only 10 or 15% of Baptist churches that celebrate Maundy Thursday. So you may not have much history with Maundy Thursday, but for those of you who've been in Maundy Thursday services, can you talk about your memories of Maundy Thursday services?
Well, my first time was here at Wilshire, and that's the only time I've ever celebrated it, but I remember the first time, it was so profound because I really didn't know what to expect, and it's kind of my experience here has been that it was sort of interpretive. They do different things, it doesn't have a standard worship format. The first time I saw it, it was actually an interpretive, almost like play kind of thing that had been done by one of our former members who passed, and she was new theater and all that. So it had even like interpretive dance and different things. It was wonderful. And then one year I was able to work with one of the other guys from the church, and we did a lot of the readings from the balcony. And so it's always different, but I think that ending where the Bible is slammed shut and all the lights go out and walking out in silence. And to me, I felt for the first time that loneliness of, he's gone. And then on Easter Sunday, I think it had a much more amazing feel, just going those 3 days in darkness. And I thought that was pretty impressive.
Yes. Good, good. Anyone else, a memory of a Maundy Thursday service that you want to share?
Our Methodist church at home, where I came from in Poto, it was businessmen in town, dentists and podiatrists. I just knew all these people because I lived there a long time, and I was invited to go, and it was like a play, but they memorized everything. There was no reading, and they talked at the table, the Last Supper, and they just sat and talked to each other, and they had the costumes, and it was like you just felt like you were there. It was very, and we'd never done that in a Baptist church, so I just went not knowing, like you, not knowing what to expect, at all. And it was really touching. I don't remember the very end. I don't remember that, but that may have been what happened too.
We did a Lord's Supper reenactment one year.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it's very
Well,
touching.
Let me wrap this up by saying the most memorable one I've ever attended was in Abilene when I was pastor there. It's traditional to dim the lights or turn off the lights and leave in darkness. And one year, we ended the service by saying, and they crucified him, and we turned off the lights, and we had a wooden cross up in front, and we had a man who started hammering nails. And you walked out with the sound of nails being hammered. The last thing I want to say is the most memorable sermon I've ever heard on the crucifixion was by a layman. My brother was a member of the One Cup Church of Christ. They had a common cup, and the layman did all the work in the church. They didn't have paid ministry. And one year I heard a layman in his church try to preach on the crucifixion, and he couldn't. He just kept crying. He would read and say a few words and then start crying. And it was the most memorable sermon I've ever heard on the crucifixion.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, well, I've got the prayer requests here. For one thing, Ray and Laura Snow aren't here today because they are not feeling well, so hope and pray for their quick recovery. And one thing that I neglected to mention earlier is that Timothy Peoples will be here with us next week for a little while. So we'll have an abbreviated lesson from Jim Hancock.
Everything will start at the same time, right?
As far as I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. And so, David, your father-in-law, doing better?
I visited with him yesterday in rehabilitation. He's able to get up and walk around some.
Excellent.
Probably lost a little bit of weight, but he was in much better spirits, breathing a lot easier. So
Great.
Where's Patty today? Is she sick?
Well, she's been struggling with migraines. She's on the mend. She's doing better, but she stayed home just.
Well, we were gonna sing happy birthday to
Yeah,
her.
you know
Tell her
what?
happy birthday.
It's coming up. I
Yeah.
tell her, thank you.
It's probably best that she didn't hear that.
Hey, I'm in the choir.
Oh, that would have been,
Oh,
that would have
choir.
been very nice, I'm sure.
By the way, you dropped something on the floor.
And
Okay,
Francis
come apart.
Jones eye surgery Tuesday.
It's jewelry.
And so what more might we know about that?
But which one?
Francis Jones?
Oh, she has, if you know her real well, you know she has one eye. She was born like that, I think, and that's why she was probably in the orphanage. You know, it's because she wasn't perfect, but she has this one glass eye, and she just has the one working eye, and she's having surgery on that Tuesday. And they're gonna put a patch on it for 24 hours, and I don't know, she's told us this 3 or 4 times, she's just terrified of not being able to see at all for 24 hours. She said, I'm not worried about the surgery, and I thought, I just told her this morning, I said, you know, you're gonna be okay. You have somebody with you all the time, and you're gonna be okay, but just pray for her confidence in all that she's going through. But it is scary to have them do surgery on the one only good eye you have.
Yeah.
It's real scary.
Well, Ronnie is improving, a little bit of stomach pain, I guess, but
Yeah, he is.
seems
He's
to do well.
some pain, because he's a contractor, so he's gone back to work, I think probably too soon, but he is getting better. Just, I noticed several days of the, oncoming pain, because he would moan out loud and
Sure.
things like that.
What was causing the pain?
He had an abdominal
Issue?
large hernia in the abdominal. So.
And Linda, do we know more about your biopsy?
Well, okay, so they didn't do the actual biopsy this past week because the surgeon had said he really wanted to look at it himself. The dermatologist had said they believed it could be at risk for melanoma. The surgeon wanted to look at it and see just how much he really felt like it could be, and then he wanted to talk to me about what was involved with the biopsy because it's really almost like a mini surgery. So we're gonna do it April 6th. They'll remove the toenail completely. They'll do a biopsy from the skin underneath that nail, and then they'll do some from the cuticle area, and then also on the sides of my toe. So it'll be kind of messy, but.
And do we know how long it'll take for the results to come back? So
He said they're gonna try to rush it when it's things like that. So he said hopefully within 3 to 5 business days, but. And then I have 2 other spots that have to be surgically removed in my back that I'll have done the following week. So those I'm not worried about, it's just the hassle of trying to take care of them on your back. But the toe, I'm a little concerned. I was a little concerned the more I talked to him about it. He said, my gut is it probably isn't, because these are so rare, but he said, I wanted you to understand why I don't think we can take a risk. And I said, I agree. So,
Better be safe than sorry.
yeah, especially something like melanoma. If you have any black spots on your toenails, look into it.
And I guess the last of the live updates, Kay may be joining us again.
Well, I don't know, she is driving a little bit last week, and she might be, she's growing some hair back. She's still got a patch on her eye, but she's busy, she has to rest a lot.
Well, we'll be hopeful that we'll get to see her again.
I talked to her this week on our calling list, and she said she hopes to come back in 2 or 3 weeks and
That'd be
be
wonderful.
with us. So, yeah, we just, hope for that.
Okay, well, good. Well, and Patty and I saw Barbara Floyd this week at dawn and had a real nice visit with them. Others of you have as well, I think. And she's just chipper and good spirits, seems strong. They want her to take it easy for a few weeks while she recuperates, but she's doing very well. Joe, I guess another live update. Good news on the employment front, yes?
Yes, start the new job tomorrow.
Outstanding.
It's exciting
Good
after
for you.
after 6 months of being bored. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to get back to work and be productive again.
Outstanding. Well, the last 2 that I have on my list that aren't here with us to share in person, Allison Wingfield with COVID-19, I haven't heard an update on that, but we'll pray for her continued recovery from that. And then Cornelia, and I'm not sure what her last name is, but Ray's, is it sister-in-law? Sister, I think. And we can't get a live update on that since the snow's on here today, but maybe next week we'll know more. So,
Well, is Dennis in California to be with his sister? Isn't his sister in California? Is that why they're up there? Does anybody know? I just wondered if.
That's right. I would want to confirm with Diana.
His
but
son's
she-
out there too.
Oh,
I
is
can't,
his
yeah, I
son?
can't remember,
That's true,
he
yeah.
told me last week and the way my memory works.
I know, well, I wondered later, and I could have asked him, I've emailed him 2 or 3 times this week, but
Yeah.
I didn't, I thought, well, maybe that's, I hope she's getting better, that's
Yeah,
what.
so traveling mercy for the Smiths, traveling mercies for the Smiths. Anything that I didn't touch on? I would say a quick prayer before we go downstairs for the service. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the lesson that Bill brought us. Thank you for the chance to reflect on the horror and the wonder and the grace of the crucifixion. Lord, you've heard us as we discussed these on our prayer list, and we'd ask for those needs to be met, for a tangible sense of your presence and your comfort to be available to all those and to us as we go through our week. We ask these things in your Son's name.
Anybody want one of these brochures about the trip? Anybody want to just look it over? It's not exactly what you have. I don't think all of this is on the tapestry, but it may be.
No.
Thank you, yeah. Good to see you. Good to see you this week. How are you doing? I'm good. Busy. There you go. See, I'm troubled, you know. Yes.
Spring is upon us.
It is, and I love that, but boy, congratulations. I'm going to see one yesterday, I went out and covered some plants, and it, you know, it was just such a nice day.
Well, thank you.
That feels
The
good.
lesson was terrific.
Does feel good. I like it because people come up and rub me like that, and they go, oh.
Is that why you wear it?
That's why I wear it, that's why I wear it. I don't get the hugs anymore, you know, I kind of miss that, so.